I would have personally met 100-ish bankers. Almost 80% of them said no.
When you began the idea of Razorpay, how did the idea emerge for you?
It was easier to accept cash than to accept digital payments. It happened a lot by accident. Both me and Shashank were techies. Honestly, we never really thought of a startup or like something like that. We were just techies who used to love to code.
You're painting a picture of a very typical geek. हम ही कोड बना लेते हैं.
हाँ, why can't I build it? Like मैं बना लेता हूँ यार. Simple लग रहा है तो सुनने में.
You know those messages you get, oops, something went wrong. People hate saying that.
Average failure rate of transactions in India when we entered in the space used to be almost 30%. Today we are able to bring it down to almost 6%.
So what's the elevator pitch?
So we want to be the de facto platform for startups to accept payments. Out of 120 unicorns that India has, Razorpay powers almost 105 of them.
Digital payments have become such a big part of our everyday life that if I tell you today that it was at one point a disruption, you probably would not even remember. But there was a time when the simple act of being able to pay through your phone for anything, even at a small amount, was a big deal. And there is a whole ecosystem of people, companies, and products that made that happen, which is why we have a very interesting speaker on The Disruptor today. I'm speaking with Harshil Mathur of Razorpay, who's joining in to tell us about a journey where you needed to be at the right place at the right time, but that was not enough to get where you are today. Harshil, with that introduction, thank you so much for joining us on The Disruptors.
No, thanks a lot for inviting me. I look forward to the conversation.
Okay, I'm going to start with a very basic question. What does Razorpay do?
Yeah, no, good question. So I think, we started as a payments company, but today we basically help businesses of all sizes, from startups to large companies, accept, process, and disperse payments. Right? So think of when you go to a platform like Swiggy or a Zomato and you want to pay digitally, Razorpay comes in, handles your card details or your UPI ID, completes the transaction, accepts this money, and then pays it to the business, let's say Swiggy, so that they can deliver your order. So that's what we do as core. We also help businesses get access to, let's say, credit with our tie-ups with lenders and so on. We help businesses do other kind of dispersals. So when they collect money through Razorpay, if they want to pay vendors, suppliers, employees, all of that can also happen through Razorpay. So those are the extensions. And besides India, we are also now in multiple markets. We are in Malaysia, Singapore, and multiple other markets outside India.
So you're servicing merchants, you're servicing sellers who are
Yep.
then able to go ahead and distribute their products and take payments
Yep.
digitally.
Yes.
Is that a space which is very, very competitive? And I'm asking this because it actually is. A lot of people are doing that. The technology exists. It's not a very high moat.
Yeah. No,
But you've stayed on top.
Yeah. No, so see, if you're saying that are there other payment companies, sure, there are many, and anything in India is competitive because the size of opportunity that India has. What really matters is that how can we do it in the most efficient way possible? So, because for a business that we power, let's say Swiggy or Zomato or Flipkart, when the transaction happens, the completion is really important. So having the best product experience, ensuring the best customer experience. I mean, a lot of times you would have tried to make a payment on a website and the payment fails, and that's the worst experience you can have because then you're worried, is my money stuck? Is my money gone somewhere? How do I get it back? Sometimes you want a refund and the refund doesn't happen on time. So if a payment provider that does that the best stands to win out, and over time we have perfected our product, perfected our technology to extent that we can say we have the best product out there in terms of completion rates, in terms of success rate, in terms of the time it takes to complete a transaction, in terms of time it takes to complete a refund. And that is what makes us stand out than anyone else. And that's why we are the largest player in that space today.
Yeah, so if you're wondering, you know those messages you get, oops, something went wrong. People hate saying that. So you're saying you're standing out as the least number of those messages coming
we are the most
through.
reliable payment provider in the country.
Give us the data to back that. Why would you say that? What's your market share? Why are you saying you're more reliable than others?
Yeah, so today we process about $180 billion of payment volume in the country annually. That makes us larger than anyone else in that space. So we power the largest number of internet merchants in the country, almost 5 million plus businesses. Another stat that I love is out of 120 unicorns that India has, Razorpay powers almost 105 of them. So almost all major internet companies and unicorns, whether it's Swiggy, Zomato, Flipkart, Oyo, any major internet company that you've heard of, Lenskart, and so on, we power almost all of them across online and offline. Uh, the most interesting stat for me is that the average failure rate of transactions in India when we entered in the space used to be almost 30%. Today we are able to bring it down to almost 6%. So that's the delta that we have produced, that we have brought the failure rates down from 30% to less than 6%, and we hope to get it down to zero at some point of time, but that's a constant endeavor.
So let's start with your journey, Harshal. When you began the idea of Razorpay, how did the idea emerge for you and your co-founders? Where were you in life at that point? What were you doing?
Yeah, so it happened a lot by accident. Both me and Shashank were techies, and we never really thought of a startup or like something like that. We were just techies who used to love to code. So we met each other in college in IIT Roorkee. We got to know each other. We started working together there, and when we graduated college, both of us got placed in large MNC jobs. I was placed in Schlumberger in Middle East. Shashank was in Microsoft in US. And like any large MNC jobs, we used to have a lot of free time. So we used to spend, and
I like that.
and both of us were not really, to put it simply, we didn't really have much of a life. So we didn't really know what to do with that free time. We didn't want kind of people who would go out and party or do something like that. So we used to do what techies do: sit down and code. So
You're painting a picture of a very typical geek.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm not denying that. Right, that was the case. So we used to write code. We used to spend our evenings writing code, building products, building side projects, doing things because we like them, and so on. And for one of those things, we were trying to build a social crowdfunding platform, more like a side project. That hey, like a lot of people want to help people out. A lot of people want to raise money for things that are going in their life. How can we make it easier? And for that, we wanted to accept payments online because that's the basic thing you need to build a crowdfunding platform. So, and that's when we realized it's very hard. It was very hard to accept digital payments in India. So, you're not very to what you said in the start. It was easier to accept cash than to accept digital payments.
Which year is this?
This is 2014.
Yeah.
And we felt like that makes no sense. But when it came to payments, digital payments, it was easier to accept cash. Digital payments was only for large companies because it was very complicated, very painful. The integration process was very hard. It was a 3 to 6 month documentation process. So when we started speaking to other startups or small companies at that point of time, everyone said that we started by accepting cash. In fact, 80 to 85% of all transactions on Flipkart used to be cash at that point of time. Flipkart was the largest startup in the country at about $1 billion. And that made no sense to us. So we completely from non-financial background. We didn't know how hard this could be, and maybe it's a good thing we didn't know how hard this could be. Maybe we didn't take taken this step. And he thought, as like any techie or a geek says, how hard could this be? And so
हम ही कोड बना लेते हैं.
हाँ, why can't I build it? Like मैं बना लेता हूँ यार, एक simple लग रहा है तो सुनने में. It is a hard problem, but also it felt like that it's a problem that a lot of people face because the more companies we spoke to, the most businesses we spoke to, even the largest ones at that point of time, even like companies like Flipkart, nobody had it sorted. Everyone said, yeah, it's very painful and it is, but it is what it is. Like we deal with it because that's the way India runs right now. So, and we thought that hey, we could change it. So we started building the product. We started developing this, and a funny story happened. So unlike a lot of things in e-commerce or stuff like that, where you can just build, promote, and deploy, in payments you can't just build and deploy. You need to tie up and get a bank approval and get a bank partner. And again, as I said, we're not from finance backgrounds. We didn't know how that process goes. So I was in Jaipur in my hometown. I went into a bank branch next to my home and said, hey, I want to start a payment gateway. How do I go about it? The guy looked at me, do you want a payment gateway? I said, no, I want to start a payment gateway of my own. And he said, like nobody walks into a bank branch and says that. So the guy was utterly confused. It took so much time to just figure out the right person to go about it. Then we went around and then we found, okay, this is some guy in Delhi who does these approvals. I connected to him, sent him a business plan. He looked at it, spoke to me, and then rejected us. So he said, "You are not from finance background. You have no idea what you're doing.
Yeah.
You're a techie who said, hey, I can build this. We are not going to approve you." Sure.
At this point, the MNC job where you have tons of time is still going on, or
MNC job is going on. We have not left our job. So we built the
so
product.
that's smart.
Yeah, so building the product on the side, we already started building the product. We started talking to people who would use it if we were to go live, and all of that. It was going well. Building the product part was also going well, but this was the hardest part, and this has been the hardest part of our journey. Right, so I went down to meet another banker. I went and met his senior. I went and met some other banker, and in the 6 months from there, I would have personally met 100-ish bankers. Almost 80% of them said no or like some of them said, yeah, I'll look at it, we'll see, and so on. So we kept going around that, we kept building a product, and finally I had a meeting in Mumbai. It's important here because finally I had a meeting in Mumbai with a guy who was a relatively younger guy in a bank who understood what we were talking about, who understood what startups are, who understood what we were trying to do, and said, okay, I can give you an in-principle approval. And I remember that because that meeting happened on a Friday. The next Monday, I left my job. Right, so this is the only thing I was waiting for. I left my job and I said, because by this time, now the startup idea was taking shape.
Which bank was this? Will you share it?
It was HDFC Bank.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which finally said, okay, let's take a bet. And that
Yeah.
one
It was
executive.
one individual in that bank who said that, okay, it's Kamla Mills in Mumbai. So it was that one individual who was relatively younger, who understood what we were doing, and who said yes. And we were really thankful because that was the only thing we were waiting for.
So that when one came on, then everyone else was okay to come on board.
No, not at
No.
all. We got one bank, but we needed one bank to start with. So we got one bank, we integrated that, we enabled that, like the yes was one thing. It took us almost a year from there to do our first live transition because it's just the yes is not okay. You still have to
Yeah.
get certifications, you still have to get approval. The bank wanted to audit you. All of that happened, and it took us almost a year. So that meeting happened, I think, in Feb 2014. We did our first live transition in March 2015. So it took us almost a year.
It's a matter of credibility, right? That's two ends of that pipeline. You're
Yeah.
in the middle.
Yeah.
One is the banks who are going to send and receive those payments. The other is the merchants. And
Merchant.
then, of course, the customer who has to believe that the payment will actually go
Yeah.
and the product or service will actually come.
Yeah, and then you need to and then everyone is worried. Like the bank is worried that hey, are not a fly-by-night operator. You don't onboard a random bunch of fraudsters and then run away with the money. The merchant is worried that hey, you are approved by the bank and my money is going to come to my account if you accept it on my behalf. Like because typically in payments the order is shipped before the money is received, right? So like so when we power payments to Swiggy, you complete a transaction on let's say a credit card, the money comes to Swiggy after 2 days. But Swiggy is going to deliver that order right now. So if I don't send them the money after 2 days, they're out of pocket. So the merchant has to trust me that, hey, I'm going to give you my money and you're trusting my word that, hey, this transaction is successful, ship the product, you'll get the money.
Since you did this with at least 100 bankers, so what was the elevator pitch?
So the pitch to bankers was that we're trying to build a new age payment platform. We want to focus on startups and young companies coming up in the country because this 2014 a lot of new companies were coming up. Flipkart was a large startup, but the whole wave of startups were coming in. So we want to be the de facto platform for startups to accept payments. And most banks focused on large companies and large businesses at that point of time. Startups were just coming in. We said a huge wave of internet companies are going to come in the next 10 years. We want to be the de facto payment platform for them. But see, banks really rarely care about the elevator pitch, right? They're not investors, right? They are worried about the risk. So the elevator pitch was fine, and they said, yeah, that's all good and well, but what about your credibility? How do you manage risk? How do you control fraud? How do you identify businesses who are fraudulent? How do you identify consumers who are fraudulent? How are you going to prevent it? And at the last, how much security deposit can you give? Because what if fraud happens? How do we ensure that you can cover that cost? So I remember like the bank asked for about 25 lakh rupees of security deposit. Now for a middle class guy, like none of us have 25 lakh rupees liquid lying in account. So my co-founder's grandfather had a bunch of land. He mortgaged that land and lent us 25 lakh rupees to give to the bank so that we could go and start doing this. So that's how it started.
What was the bank balance when you got that first approval?
Bank balance, like for us individually, not much. Like we were just in our jobs. Like they were high paying jobs, but we were in jobs for like 2-3 months. So maybe 5 lakh or something because of the 10 months of job that I had done. Because we didn't have really as I said, we didn't have much of a life, so all the salary was sitting in our accounts. But that was the bank balance.
Yeah, and then what's interesting over here, and I find this very interesting in all of our conversations that I have on this show, how it always comes down to the faith of 2 or 3 individuals, which makes an idea turn into a success.
Yeah.
The idea might be great, but it has to have just human faith.
Yeah, no, everyone needs. You need a lot of believers. Like forget the money part of it. Just the starting point. When we told our parents that hey, we're going to leave our jobs or high-paying MNC jobs and do this full time. Like Shashank had gone on offer in Microsoft, and he was one of those guys that you read in newspapers that IIT Roorkee boy gets 1 crore package from Microsoft. Like this is how he was covered in Patna, his hometown, when he got that job. And then a couple of months later, he's calling his dad and saying, I'm going to leave this job and I'm going to go home and now do a startup with 0 salary, right? Same for me. Like I called my dad and saying I was in Abu Dhabi. I said, I'm going to come down, do this startup and going to build from Jaipur, from our house. And first question is like, how much are you gonna get paid? Nothing. And we don't know if we ever gonna get paid, if it ever works out. But that's what we want to do. So that support from the parents and
What
family
was the
mattered a lot.
response? What was the first response?
Uh, I, mean, I don't know how he thought. The first response, like he was like, okay. He asked a lot of questions. Why do you want to do this? Like, do you think you can find this a job like this again? And that was the first question he had. Like, do you think you can find a job like this? It's a high-paying job. What if this doesn't work out? How do you get that? And then the second question that he had was, are you sure? Have you thought about this? Like, are you sure you want to do this? But he didn't discourage me. So he was like, okay, if you feel this is right, the only thing I told him that trust me, I can find a job again. So if this doesn't work out, give me 1-2 years. If it doesn't work out, I can find a job again. That much faith you should have in me. But let me give this a shot.
Wow.
And he was-
What an and from there to here, what an amazing journey and story it has been. You are a leader in your space. You're over $1 billion company, growing at a breakneck speed, and of course, now the Indian capital market is what you're eyeing. That's the next exciting leg.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we always built a company to be an independently sustainable business. The scale that we are, at the size that we are, it's the right point for us to go public because once you're a public, you're an institution, you're an independently sustainable company, right? And that matters a lot to us, at least to me and Shashank, that we want to build a long-term sustainable public institution. Like private companies can come in, do well, die tomorrow, but creating a public shareholder value brings us with a lot of responsibility. But at the same time, it's also something that people dream of, honestly. Right? I think for us, like of course, the initial dream used to be that hey, we want to build a startup that like something that just works, something that can be a business. But then slowly, as that started happening, then we wanted to say, hey, can we build a large enough business? So let's say a unicorn or larger than that. And then once we crossed that, the next biggest dream was that can we create a long-lasting institution? And creating a public company is the best way to ensure that it's an institution. It's not something that's dependent on one person, two people, me or Shashank for that matter. It's an institution that runs on its own course. And I think going public is an important milestone in that journey.
Yeah, but it also exposes you to a lot of scrutiny.
Yeah.
And the reason I ask this is because that journey we've seen from hallowed and celebrated startup to a listing which everyone's very excited about, and people are already excited about your potential listing, and then the balance sheet starts hitting. Maybe the stock market is in a different space. And then you are faced with a lot of scrutiny. And that's, equity investors can be ruthless.
Yeah. No, it's going to be hard. And it's a challenging thing. I'm not denying that. It's hard, it's complicated, it's challenging. But we came in the business of startup to do challenging stuff. Right? It's not a listing day and the celebration around that matters. It's what can we do post that? Can we deliver really a long-term return for the shareholders that come in? Can we deliver an outcome? And I think it's a challenge that I want to undertake. And we believe we're in the right position, we have the right ingredients, we have the right business model, we have the right opportunity to be able to do that.
How do you ensure, though, that you stay at the cutting edge? Because that opportunity which is there are for others to grab as well. They might be two geeks, not to use it in a bad word, sitting right now, coding in their spare time, thinking of the next idea that disrupts you.
Yeah, and the ecosystem is changing very rapidly as well. Like with AI and all of that, like the world is changing. So we can't sit on what we have built so far. We have to keep innovating. In fact, we are a pure tech company. Our core differentiation is tech and product. And the good part about tech and product is that there's always new things happening. The bad part is there's always new things happening. Any moat in tech and product lasts for 6 months at best. Because the world is changing that rapidly. You build the best product out there, you are better than anyone else, you launch some new feature. 6 months later, every other company will have it.
Yeah.
So our differentiator at the end of the day is how can we keep doing everything new every 6 months? And that's what we keep focusing on. So everything, one of our biggest brand promise to our merchants or businesses that use us is anything new that happens in the payment ecosystem, we'll be the first ones to bring it. Every month, at the minimum, we have 5 to 6 major product launches. And it's constant new
5 to 6 product launches every month.
Yeah. Constantly. Because it's changing. So, for example, like starting with 2016, UPI came in 2015.
Yeah.
Right.
That changed the game.
It changed the game. But UPI initially, when it was launched in 2015, it was only a P2P instrument. We were the first payment gateway in the country to enable UPI for P2M, for making payments to businesses. So before Razorpay enabled UPI, you couldn't pay to businesses on UPI. It was only P2P, right? So we launched that. We became the first company to launch that. We were very small at that point of time. But that became a big thing because when we launched that on UPI, everyone talked about how Razorpay has enabled that, and that gave us a lot of boost. So when UPI suddenly started getting popular, every major company wanted to accept UPI. They all came to us. In fact, Nandan sir tweeted about us how Razorpay has taken UPI live for businesses for the first time. Similarly, UPI 2.0 happened. Mandates happened, apps by mandates happened, recurring payments, UPI autopay happened. We were the first ones to launch each of these. In fact, yesterday I was there at the Beam 3.0 launch. We were the first payment gateway to launch Beam 3.0. So that has been the constant drive to constantly innovate and launch new products. Outside UPI, RBI allowed card tokenization where you can save your card across merchants. We're the first platform to launch that. Recurring payments on cards happened. We're the first platform to enable that. Similarly, CV-less transactions happened. We were the first platform to enable it. So anything in product and tech, we can't sit on ourselves and say, hey, we built the moat. Let's just sit and enjoy this moat. There's a constant effort to drive that. 2 months back, we launched AI payments on UPI, which is, if you're building an AI agent today, how can you enable payments inside that? We built the first SDK in the country to enable payments on AI using Razorpay. Because
Give me an example of how that would work.
yeah, so in next 3-4, it's hard to imagine how fast technology moves, but let's say next 1 year out, AI agents will be everywhere, which is you speak to an AI agent and say, hey, find me a flight to Delhi for today evening. It finds your flight. Now you can go ahead and say, book me this flight. And the AI agent will do the payment, has your card saved with it, will do the payment for you, ask you for the OTP inside the chat, and complete the transaction. We are providing an SDK to enable that.
How do you ensure there's no fraud there?
Yeah, so we handle the completion of transactions. So the OTP is entered on our screen and so on, but we handle the end-to-end completion of transaction, end-to-end security of the transaction. So the AI agent can't see your sensitive private data, but the AI agent can use, it basically gets a token which it can call to complete the transaction. So it basically stores your authentication, but Razorpay has the final card number and so on. So the agent never gets to see your card number, so it doesn't get leaked out and go anywhere else. But at the same time, it can call the transaction for you. And that's the world we are imagining. So we launched it. We launched it 2 months back, even though there are no major AI agents that do this today. But we launched it today because as somebody starts building an AI agent tomorrow, Razorpay is the only product out there that supports payments via AI.
So it's about anticipating a demand and fulfilling it
Fulfilling
in
that.
advance. So now, okay, let's get from this industry question to a specific question about you. You said you have 1,000 people doing this. How much do you micromanage? And do you still code?
Yeah, don't get to code at all, at least not in Razorpay. I do personal coding on the side.
Now you have a job which makes you work.
Yeah. So yeah, that is the right way to put it. So I don't get to code. Also, our engineering quality is really high. So I don't think if I wrote any code, our engineering managers are going to accept my code anymore. So we are much ahead of that. But I still try to keep myself hopped up on the latest trends that are happening in the ecosystem. For example, on AI, I keep trying every latest AI tool that comes in. Because if I'm not aware, how do I push my team?
What's your favorite tool right now in terms of LLMs?
LLMs, they are all generic, and I use ChatGPT, I use Perplexity, and all of that. But I'll talk about core AI tools which are really changing the way you work. For example, I started using this tool called Replit, which is a AI-based coder, essentially, or app developer. Basically, it's a chat bot, like you download an app, you tell it, build me an app for this, and it builds you an app. It's so beautiful. I tried it once and I was floored. And I was like, this is going to change the world. Because I asked it, like, for example, I do calorie tracking, how much am I eating and all of that. I've used calorie trackers, but I always have this, hey, why don't we have this feature? Why don't I have that feature? I asked it to build a calorie tracker tool. Within 20 minutes, it was ready. Then I said, add this feature, 5 minutes, it was ready. Then I said, I don't want to input things myself. I want to send you a voice note at the end of the day so that you can figure out what did I eat today. And it built that feature. Like, it is just amazing. So I enjoyed it so much. I told my entire leadership team that every one of you needs to download this tool and try to start using it, because you need to know how the world is going to change. Because today it's a prototyping tool. Essentially, it generates a simple app. But tomorrow it's going to write code and end-to-end for companies like us.
Aren't you glad you're not a coder right now? If your prime job is...
Yeah.
No, so you know what the question I'm leading to.
Yeah, I know.
What is it going to do to jobs?
It's not going to do anything to jobs. It's going to empower us to do a lot more. Like and I've been a coder myself, a lot of times when you're coding, the part where you use your brain the most is not typing code. It's when you're designing the application. How should the application look like? What the flow needs to be and all of that. That part cannot be taken away by AI.
So you don't see it as a big threat, but a future.
I'll give an example. When ATMs came in, this just remove cashiers and take away their jobs, or it made cashiers more productive. That now cashiers could do actually high value transactions, actually more useful transactions. The bank branches didn't go away, but they became more productive. That's what I feel AI is going to do. The basics jobs, which don't require that much of a human intelligence, are going to go away. So every developer, if they have AI behind it, is going to be a 10x developer because they can produce 10x more outcome now because the AI is there to code. So they can just think of things, tell it to code, move on to the next thing.
Yeah. As we wrap up, Harshal, a lot of people watching this may be thinking that how do I turn my idea into a success story? What, in your view, is your advice? What would be the test of whether an idea is actually a good idea or a bad one?
Yeah, no, it's a hard problem, and for most startups, like that's where you struggle the most. I think the way I see it is like there are two or three things. First is you have to find who's your core customer base. Who are you building for? Forget customer, whatever. Whose problem are you solving? Right? Like, find somebody whose problem you're really solving, who really cares about the problem that you're solving. Right? And as you find more and more people like that, keep testing what you're building with them. So, like, can I give you my example? Even today, when we're building new things, I am constantly worried. Are we building that's actually needed? In our early journey, when I said we were facing bank rejections and so on and everything, there was a lot of reasons for us to get discouraged and say, why are we building this? The only thing that kept us going was I was constantly speaking to people who would use us. And every time I would speak to a new person, they'll say, yeah, this is the biggest problem. If you solve this, I'm going to use you. So that was my proof of the pudding that all of these rejections, 100 rejections is fine. Once I get that one approval, I have 100 customers sitting who want to use me.
What is the problem you would solve if you had to start today?
But today, if I'm going to start, it's going to be something in AI. This definitely for sure. AI agents are going to change the way we interact with technology. It's going to massively change. Today, most of the apps that we use are going to go away, and it's going to be one AI agent that takes care of everything and connected to every app. So it's a hard problem. A lot of companies are trying it, but excites me a lot.
Okay, so here's to solving many more problems and keeping up that pace. Thank you so much, Harshal, for your time. It's been a
Thank
pleasure.
you.